Holmes,
Here.
Andy Kishitz,
Present.
Brad Reed,
Present.
Elizabeth Hutchins, and Gabrielle Amano.
Present.
Okay, perfect.
Great.
So just by way of overview, the applicant had scheduled a meeting before the design review board that was held last Thursday, the 10th at 7 p.m. To present architectural plans and landscaping to the DRB. We originally were going to meet last week on this project, but because of that hearing, we had been given a request to postpone or continue the hearing till tonight, where the applicant will present their plans to us as well, for architecture and the landscaping, and potentially providing feedback that they incorporated post that design review board. So with that, why don't we start with that part of the process, and then we'll have question and answers from the board, from Valerie or Joe Piznola, and then move on to other items of our meeting. So you're up, Jim, or one of your professionals.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. Members of the board, good evening. So before we dive into the presentation, I thought it would be good just if I could just provide a couple of quick updates on just various sort of ongoings of where we're at with the project. So first one, as you've already mentioned, we met with the DRB last Thursday night and had a really good meeting, which you attended, and we took copious notes, and there was some follow-up from Valerie as well today, which largely I think matched what we had. So that was a really good meeting. And tonight when we present, that was Thursday night. And so certainly we have not incorporated any revisions in a design to what you'll see tonight, but we do intend to comment along the way on the comments that were made by the DRB, and, you know, our thoughts on how to respond to those for next time you'll see the design. That's one. The ANRAD has been submitted. I think that is an advancement since last we met. So that will be underway through the Concom. Our anticipation is the A&R will be submitted by Condyne, the landowner, early next week, is our understanding. In terms of the peer review status, so there was two things. There was a site walk today with Horsley Witten that Alan and Major attended. I understand went well. I wasn't able to attend. But more importantly, there is written responses underway, both to the civil peer review and traffic. So those will be completed in short order and submitted, and we can certainly discuss those likely at our next meeting. We did receive updated department comments from Valerie today, which I've gone through and have sent around to the team for review. So, I mean, we probably could be in a position to touch on some of that tonight, but not really formally respond, just given folks haven't had a long time to digest those. But we have received those and appreciate that, and we are going through those. And then we have started some dialogue as well with the town about, you know, direction on the which is also included in the comments on the access to the fields and the community gardens. So we knew that would be coming back around, so we've started those discussions. So a lot of happenings. I just felt, you know, for some cleanup items might be good to update the board. So happy to answer any questions on that, but otherwise I'm going to hand it over to Adam Wagner from Market Square Architects, who is going to run through the architecture. And then I believe Bart Lipinski, yeah, I see him there now, from Grady Consulting will follow up with landscape presentation.
Just one thing, Jim. That was a good list of items that shows a lot of activity and progress, which is going to be great. Keep the project moving. One item, did you have any update, or, I mean, not that it has to be done, but with the special permit issue?
I will defer to Debbie Horowitz. Debbie, are you? Oh, there you are. Debbie, do you have an update for the board?
Yeah, we're working with town council to figure out the best way to get you some updated information so that we can take care of that.
Okay, perfect. Just don't want that to fall off, because, you know, that'll be important before we get to the close of a hearing.
Yeah, absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate that. And that's certainly something that through Debbie and through town council, we've been focused on trying to figure out the best path. So we're on it and are hoping to move that forward in short order here as well.
Perfect, thanks. Okay, well, I don't want to interrupt the rest of your time, so whoever wants to speak first, go ahead.
I will take it away from there, and if it's okay, I will share my screen. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear. Anyone else have any? Thanks, Adam.
All right. This says host disabled participant screen sharing. So if I can get permission, that would be great.
Valerie,
It should work now.
And I hope it's as good a presentation as you did last week with the design review board. That was a good presentation.
Well, I got to be honest. Jason did that presentation, my colleague, and he had something come up tonight. So you get my version of it. And
well, the pressure's on then.
What's that?
The pressure's on then.
It really is. So hopefully you can see the screen at this point. Is that correct?
No.
Nope.
You
No,
can't
not
see
yet.
All right, let's try this again. How about now?
Yeah, there we go.
Now we can.
Okay, so now you can see the site plan. Excellent. Well, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Adam Wagner. I am one of the partners at Market Square Architects. And as mentioned, I'm pinch hitting for my colleague, Jason Yu aboard tonight. So for those of you who saw our presentation to the DRB the other night, you're going to see a lot of similar things. And as Jim mentioned, that was just last Thursday. So we haven't had a chance to respond to any of the comments that were made at the DRB meeting, but those are all things that we have documented and we're starting to go through and modifications that we will be making. So I'm going to start here with the site plan, just for orientation standpoint. Here's Main Street. Here's the main entry off of Main Street. There is an existing commercial office building located here, an existing building here. So as far as the main sequence of entry into the site is concerned, the first building you come to is located here. That is our mail and package building. And the next building is the clubhouse. These small buildings you see here, we have a third one back on this side. These are small garage buildings, and those would be for tenant parking. And then we have our residential buildings. We've got two U-shaped buildings here. These are each 3-story multifamily buildings. And we have 2 bar buildings located at the rear of the site. And I will be taking you through the architecture of each one of these buildings individually. Certainly, if you have any questions along the way, feel free to stop me, ask questions, but hopefully we'll cover everything that you're looking to cover. Next slide. Why is that so small? Make that a bit larger. There you go. So our next slide here are some precedent images of architecture around Bolton. As you can see, very traditional New England architecture, barn style, colonial style architecture. And the importance of showing this slide, as you will see as we get into the architectural design of these buildings, we've pulled certain elements from these buildings to use on our proposed buildings that we hope is very reflective of the architecture in town, and in so doing makes our buildings fit into the regional architecture of Bolton. So I will be going into that a bit further as we go along. But with that, let me move to the first building. And the first building is the Clubhouse Building. We have a small key plan here. So you can see, and I'll just jump back to the site plan really quickly. If it wants to load. And it's not loading. All right, let's stay here with the Clubhouse Building. So with the Clubhouse Building, as you can see, single-story structure. We've really tried to break up the scale of the building with the gables that we're presenting as far as the roof line is concerned. Pulling key elements like the entry that relate to that precedent image that we showed. And really just trying to create something that builds around the sense of community. We've got a small stone base. We've got large windows here. And again, a roof line that is broken by these gables to give it some variation and a sense of scale.
What's the square footage of the Clubhouse Building?
Let me see.
I can
have a number written here, but Jim, do you have that number handy?
Yeah, it's just under 5,000 square feet.
Okay, thank you.
There you go. So again, here's the plan of that Clubhouse Building. Again, it's broken up to break up the scale. It's not a simple box. And then that further allows us to break up the roof plan. So as far as traditional New England architecture is concerned, a lot of variation in the roof plan to break up the scale, traditional New England gables, all working together to create, a nice piece of architecture at a scale that's appropriate to its use. And then the last slide in relation to the clubhouse. I don't know why these are all jumping around in scale. I apologize for that. These are the rendered elevations of the building. So you can see, we're doing traditional punched windows. We've got a mix of horizontal lap siding. At the entry piece, we have some board and batten siding. We've got some elements really indicative of barn architecture, both here on this end and at the main entry. We did talk with the DRB about our fenestration here, and that's something that we're going to be looking at a little bit more closely over the coming weeks. But I think from an architectural scale, general aesthetic, we have some fine tuning to do, but by and large, this is the grand scheme of the approach for that building. Any questions on this one, or you want me to just keep going?
No,
Adam.
One comment was just for the board members that weren't able to participate or listen in on the DRB. The DRB was favorable to this design. They did appreciate the inclusion of the precedents and the general window structures and the roof lines and things like that. So it was favorably received with some comments. So as Adam and both Jim mentioned.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think it was a very constructive conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, anytime you're presenting architecture, there are varying opinions. But the ultimate goal of this is to design a project that fits well within the architecture of Bolton. And we have some fine tuning to do, but by and large, we think we're close.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, I will.
I do have a question.
Sure.
Tony Jagodnik from East End Road. It looks beautiful, but is there consideration given to where solar panels might be mounted on the southern face?
DRB asked that as well. I know that Wood Partners is currently working on a project that they're putting solar panels on. And
yep.
If you want to respond further.
Yeah, I'll jump in and answer that. And Mike, feel free to jump in as well. But Tony, our focus right now on solar has been on the two larger buildings. We hadn't necessarily looked at it for the clubhouse. And we didn't feel like we had a lot of space to work with on the two smaller buildings, if you will, but the focus on what we had been talking about internally was on the two larger U-shaped buildings, but something we can look at here as well.
Okay.
Any other questions at this point? Or should I just keep trucking?
Adam, just real quick, because I know the DRB, it came up sort of toward the end, just orientation, just so everybody's clear on sort of what you see when you come in the drive and what we're looking at, if you don't mind. I know
Sure.
the site plan wasn't loading all that well, but if you could try that again, just to make sure everybody's clear on that.
Yeah, let me just give it 1 second here. All right, so we've got Main Street here. We have the main entry in. We've already talked about the clubhouse. This is the mail package room. I'll be coming back to that one. We've got two U-shaped multifamily buildings here. These are both 3-story buildings, and I'll be going through the architecture on those. And then we've got two bar-shaped multifamily buildings. Again, these are 3-story. And then this building, and this building, those are garages. They're enclosed garages for tenants that desire that. And we also have the architecture of those buildings here in this presentation. I'll be getting to them. Any further questions there? Okay. So let me jump here. All right, so this view, if you,
One question, sorry.
sure, go ahead.
Going back to the previous slide, but the parking garage on the east side of the property.
Give it a second to load. The one
The
here.
one near where your cursor is. Does that, I was just wondering about placement on that. Why wouldn't you not opt to put it further away? You kind of, does it block people's views of their cars that, you know, might be a security thing where people can't see what's going on behind that building? Just throw it out there. I didn't know why you chose to put it so close to the building.
You know, it's a valid point. I think part of it is that this is certainly a nice amenity for some residents. And it's something that those residents would pay a premium for. And so to have easy access from your residential building to your garage space is certainly advantageous. But I don't know if we consider
a little bit about sight lines and security, and if you can't see out your window to see your vehicle, it's a little more troublesome than if the vehicle is easily seen.
Is there lighting in that general vicinity too? I know we're kind of like getting away from this, but I'm just wondering what the lighting is like there.
Yeah, so you can kind of see these little black boxes around the perimeter of the parking lot.
Yeah.
Those are the exterior light fixtures. And we don't have them in this package unless Sybil has it on theirs, but they'd be cut off light poles.
Okay.
This area for a security standpoint. But point is well taken that this certainly blocks the view to these parking spaces on the backside. And so that's something we can talk through with the development team, with the landscape architect, with the civil engineer.
Adam, could I jump in and weigh in before you move off of that?
Of course you can.
Phil Cordero from Allen and Major Associates. I can help answer that question. There is a floodplain boundary that extends off of Great Brook in that zone. So the intent was to ensure that the structure stayed out of the floodplain boundary. So that's what drove its position being closer to the building, where you may think that further away from the building would be more beneficial, obviously, for safety and security and visibility. But we needed to make sure we kept those structures out of the floodplain.
That is a perfect, valid explanation for why it's placed there. I agree. Just give it some thought about the security of in the future of not being able to see some vehicles from the building.
Sure.
Thank you, Phil. I appreciate that.
Sure.
So with that, I'm going to move on to the architecture of the two U-shaped buildings. And I'll pull up this slide next. And again, you can see a small site plan here. And this cone of view is basically showing where you'd be positioned and what you'd be looking at. So in this case, you're looking at the edge of one C-shaped building and then the other edge of the other C-shaped building. Again, we've tried to break down the scale of these buildings, present them in a way that they don't seem overly large, incorporate elements indicative of the architecture there in Bolton. So predominantly, we've got horizontal siding with vertical trim bands that would probably be AZAC or something similar. We've got balconies with railings from the residential units. We've got architectural elements at the main entry, so that you identify the entry as something a little bit different. And then it's hard to see in this rendering, but if I scroll in, you can see where this is horizontal siding. We're using a vertical board and batten here at the main entry pieces, just so that they really get identified as to where the entrances of these buildings are, make the entrances a little bit special, and break up the architecture. Again, making it more consistent with the things you have there in Bolton.
Adam, if I could just jump in. So, in Mr. Chair, certainly to yours, similar to what you had mentioned in the clubhouse, I don't want to speak for the DRB, but I think overall the buildings were well received. There were a handful of comments that we're looking at on particularly on that elevation that we just saw. Adam, I don't mean to steal your thunder if you're going to get there, but there were a couple of comments, including looking at some pops of color maybe in the doorways and things like that that we're looking at as well.
Right. I think there was a comment about sort of to the right to the center, that those doors that are by the balcony, by the decks there, the windows and the doors, there's a gap or the height, so maybe do something there.
Yeah, we did have a conversation about these and a conversation about these windows as well.
Yeah, but that was at the kitchen windows, and I think with the countertops and things like that, or?
Correct. These are kitchen windows. And so one of the comments was they wish that these windows were larger. And of course, if they become larger, it interferes with our upper cabinet space in the kitchen. So that's something we're looking at. Another comment was we've got a door here and we've got double hung windows right beside it. Of course, the double hungs get pulled up off the floor because you wouldn't have those all the way down. And that creates this differentiation in height. And we had a little bit of a conversation back and forth about that because we like the idea of these nice large windows. We think it provides light and air into the units. But we did also understand that it creates an interesting detail between the doorway and the windows themselves. And it's something we're going to take a look at.
Could you do some sort of like transient, like kind of situation there to sort of fill in that gap? Potentially,
we could look at doing a transom window over the door so that heights of the door and the double hungs were equal.
Mhm.
It's something that obviously we need to look at from a constructability and budget standpoint.
Yep.
But like I said, we got some excellent feedback, and they're all things that we're going through at this point.
Can I ask what the material is for what looks like wood accents around the entry? What is the intended material of those posts? Those won't be real wood posts, I'm assuming.
We're still determining if they're going to be actual wood or if there will be a steel column
Mhm.
encased in either wood or a wood-like material. Obviously, we haven't gone through a full structural analysis of this building yet. And so we need to get through that with our structural engineer to determine what we need to do. So we need to leave it a little open-ended at this point.
Yep.
As far as the look and feel is concerned.
Yep.
All right. So where did I leave off here? We're looking at. We're looking at the floor plan of this building again, pushing and pulling the facade where we can to really break down the scale. You can see some of these balconies. Some are protruding from the building, some are partially protruding, and some are inset. Really, again, to try to make some variation. And then the last slide I have here is the roof plan. So again, you see we've got a lot of articulation in the roof. We've got some gables, we've got some sheds. And then what this is we're using the roof for our mechanical systems. So we've taken a piece out of the gable roof to create a flat area where we can put all the condenser units. And this allows us to clean up the ground level and get them up out of the way. And again, these roofs from the solar perspective, Wood Partners is currently doing a project that they're using solar on. It's something that deserves further exploration for this project, but we're not there quite yet. And then these are the two-dimensional rendered elevations of those buildings, or of that building, excuse me, really to show the color scheme that we're thinking of. So we've got a blend of neutral tones. We've got some lighter colors, some neutral tans, and some darker accents. You can see the articulation in the roof plan. And then here, you can see where that cutout is for those mechanical units. So from a ground level standpoint, they will be well hidden versus having them down here on the ground.
That would only be visible from the courtyard anyway, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say exactly where they're going to be visible from. Let me just jump back to that slide. Actually go back to. So again, here's the flat portion of that roof. And given excuse me for that. So this is at the roof level. It's up. You really have to be quite a ways away in order to see that. And given that it's on the inside of the courtyard of the U shape, it's pretty well screened.
Yeah.
For anyone who has dogs and does Zoom meetings, you know what I'm dealing with.
Mm-hmm. I have cats, and one night last week, the cats were in our room, in the bedroom, and a neighbor's dog barked at like 1 in the morning, sent the cats flying. As they ran across the bed, they ran across my head.
Oh, no.
My scalp and my head had like puncture wounds and blood spurting it. I'm like, what's going on? So yeah, dogs are, it happens.
Well, the pups went to daycare today. I was hoping they'd be asleep by now, but clearly they're not.
Right.
So here's
The unexpected.
Here's the second U-shaped building. Again, this one is 3 stories. You'll notice that it's not a perfect U-shape. There's a chamfer on the building itself, and that relates to some site plan setbacks and constraints that we had. So the shape of this building is slightly different, but again, see, we have articulated the shape of the building, the facade, to try to break up the scale. I'll show more of that in the elevations. The balconies for each of the units. Some of them are a little bit more extruded from the outside of the building, and some of them are very much inset within the building.
Similar design.
Again, very similar
Mhm.
on the roof plan design. Very similar in the approach to the elevations. The 2 U-shaped buildings. Right now, we have the same color scheme on both. And with that, I will move on to the bar buildings. So if you can see in this site plan, the cone of vision here. So we're standing just outside of the U-shaped buildings, and we're looking across the bar building on the southern portion of the site. In these buildings, we picked up the red color that you often see around town. It was part of our discussion with the DRB from last week in terms of the incorporation of the red color, perhaps with the other buildings, and that's something we're looking at. Again, you see some balconies, you see a building entry here. The approach is that the entry is designated by the vertical board and batten, where the body of the building is more of the horizontal clap siding. Very similar approach to the balconies and railings in terms of a warmer, natural material. Let's see if I can get this to look. So here's the floor plan of one of the bar buildings. And what's different about this building is that where the U-shaped buildings had an internal corridor, these buildings are set up so that you've got an entry, you've got a stair in the middle. So this entry serves 4 units, and this entry serves these 4 units. And again, a third time, this entry serves these 4. So it's a different approach to how the architecture is created, how tenants have access to their particular units. Again, we've got a lot of articulation in the facade, so it's not just a straight shot. Again, the roof plan is broken up. You see we've got some sheds, some gables, and the approach to this building is slightly different in that we're not proposing to put the mechanical units on the roof. These buildings, the mechanical units would go on the ground, partially because there wouldn't be as many units required for these buildings. Keep moving here. Again, the architectural 2-dimensional renderings. We've got the red color. We've got the white, which is the vertical board and batten. And then we've got horizontal clapboard siding. A similar approach to the balconies here. Double hung windows that are punched fenestration, sometimes in single, sometimes ganged together. But nice large windows. It's very important that we provide a lot of natural light into the units. So these aren't tiny rinky-dink windows. These are providing a lot of natural light. And again, some nice articulation and detailing around the entries. Nice wood doors, side lights, transom windows, and a small shed roof over the top of it.
So the door that you just described is only for the center, I'll call it a corridor, but you just explained it's not like really a corridor, right? So are those two, oh, wait a minute, okay.
Yeah.
So this, so what the question I was gonna ask was why you just had plain white doors that didn't have windows on the first picture up there. There, they just look like plain white doors. Is that the plan? Or just the reason I'm asking is because like that won't let as much natural light in, I would assume, right? So
these doors align with their opposite counterpart.
Okay.
Because of the way the buildings are oriented on site, they only have a front door and a back door.
Okay.
So what we've done is we've created a nice front door and a functional back door.
Okay, perfect. Yep.
So I will keep moving along here.
I wasn't at the design review board meeting, but I will say that I do like that color scheme better than the U-shaped building.
With the red.
The red, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and that's something we talked about for quite a while. And you know, is it something that we can incorporate into the U-shaped buildings? And it's something we're looking at now. So then we've got the other building, which actually is a little bit larger, has 4 entries, each entry serving 4 units, 4 units, 4, 4. So the building is slightly larger. Again, very similar approach to the roof. Again, the mechanical units for this building would be pad mounted. Color scheme very similar. And unless there are questions about the bar buildings, I will move on to these. Okay. So mentioned in the site plan, we have several garage buildings. These are single-story buildings, individual garage doors for those tenants that want to park their car in an enclosed space. We've really tried to create nice but simple buildings here. As you can see, single story, punching up a gable here to break up that roof line. Nice decorative light fixtures in between every couple of garage doors. Not a lot going on the backside, because again, this is a little bit more of a utility building, but a utility building that has been designed with some real intent to the features. Again, if you look at the end gable, we've got horizontal siding here, and then some vertical type siding on the gable ends.
Adam, I'd just like to add that we had some good comments related to the garage building at the DRB meeting. And one of the comments which we're going to incorporate is to incorporate the gables that were shown on the Clubhouse building. They're a little more articulate, a little tall, steeper pitch. So that's one of the items we're going to be incorporating to the garage, as well as the mail package room, which we'll get to in a couple slides.
And what is the reason for having one bay be larger? You expect some sort of commercial vehicle in there?
No, that's an ADA accessible space.
Okay.
Right.
And would
It has a separate door.
Okay.
So
you
it
have to have
needs
a
to be,
door with it,
it needs to be a
Very
little
good.
bit taller to accommodate a handicap van, if that's what the occupant has, and then it needs to have its own pedestrian door to go with it.
Are there a minimum number of those that you need for this project?
Yes, we have to, from an ADA standpoint, we have to look at total number of units and total number of accessible units. The same is true of our garage spaces. The same is true of our parking spaces on site. So we've been going through all those calculations, making sure we have the requisite number.
So of the garages, is this the only one that's an accessible garage unit?
This is the only bay within this garage building. And I don't know if I have both garage buildings here. Let me just see. So this is the other garage building. You can see it does not have a larger door. It does not have a pedestrian door next to it. So the calculation has been done, and for this building, it was not required. But from an architectural standpoint, it's still a very similar approach.
So there are 3 garages, correct? And you're saying only one of them has an accessible bay?
That's correct. Yeah, it's a
that's
percentage of the overall garage spaces that are required.
I have a question. It looks like there's quite a bit of space there in the attic of these garages. Is that available for storage, or are there trusses in the way?
There'll be trusses. They'll actually have a flat roof inside at the bottom of each truss.
Okay.
Can I ask a question about lighting? If you go back to the handicapped accessible one, have you considered putting a light closer to that door?
I'm sorry.
It's on the edge. You can see there's a light on one side, but there's not really any lighting around that door specifically. So if you're trying to get in, I can imagine that would be pretty dark.
Yeah, I think we would need to have one here.
Yeah.
Whether it's one of these decorative fixtures, I don't know, but we would definitely have some sort of back for it. Again, I apologize for my very vocal dogs this evening. So this was the plan of the 3rd garage building. And this one's a little bit smaller. But again, I just wanted to point out that the gables on the roof to break up the roof a little bit. This one's very simple. It does not have an accessible space within it. I think this is the last building in my presentation package. This is our mail and parcel room. So if you recall in the site plan, when you first enter into the site, on the right-hand side, we have a mail and parcel room. With any multifamily housing project, as you can imagine, parcel storage has become a very important component these days. So many people are having Amazon deliveries and grocery deliveries and whatnot. So this building serves as both a US postal delivery and a parcel delivery on the other side. Again, really a jewel box building. We've tried to keep the detailing very simple. We do have a couple of windows here on the front facade, but we don't have any windows on the back because we need those wall surfaces for the parcel packages and for the mailboxes. And you can see that here on my final slide, which we have a small roof plan here, as you can see, main gable over the entry. And then the layout of that parcel room, half of it is the package side, the other half is the mail room. need a small sprinkler room in the back because this room is required to be sprinklered. And those 2 small windows you see on the front of that building because we need the wall surface for everything else. And that concludes my architectural presentation. I would be more than happy to answer any questions that anyone has, or we can do that at the end. It's up to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Yeah.
Thank you.
If I don't hear any questions, why don't we go into the landscaping that is going to accompany these buildings and then the site.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bart, if you are there to share your screen next, I'll hand it off to you.
Okay, good evening, everybody. As Adam mentioned, if you were with us last week, I'll walk through the same presentation. If you weren't, then I will take you through it for the first time. And then what I'll do is when I get through the walkthrough, I'll hit on all the things that we discussed last week, the improvements that we will be making as we move outside of this conceptual landscape plan. Okay, so first we start up at the entry. Most of the road in this area remains the same. We're going to keep as many of the healthy looking trees as possible. We will supplement some of the plantings with new shade trees, with new flowering trees. We will also have a new entrance sign for the community as we come in. Switch back over to this side, but as we come into the site, straight ahead of us would be the amenity area. And then we would drive past the mail building, which Adam just described. So we will have plant beds around the buildings. We do have a conceptual plant list. So we have shade trees, which are the dark green symbols. The pink would be flowering type trees. Evergreens are the smaller ones around the perimeter. And then we have various plant material, shrub material for foundation plantings, low plant beds for color, and then perennial type masses as well. So as we come into the site, we have
what's that first box? Just refresh my memory. When you first come in, you get those 2 plants to the right, not the one up
here
to the entrance. Yeah, what's that?
This is the wastewater building.
A wastewater. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so as we come in, we have a pretty heavily planted buffer around the outside portion of our amenity area. Take you past the mail building, and then we would kind of come around to the site. So again, I mentioned various plant material, shrub material for the foundation plantings, color, etc. The outside amenity area, we would have a function patio. We have a grill station for grilling. We have a fire pit patio, and then a separate walkway that'll take us into the pool area where we have a big lawn area, outdoor shower, and then as much of a buffer as we can to the neighbor side. As we come back around the front, we have building 1 and 2. One of the things that was discussed was finding a way to get some more street trees around the building, and possibly as the sales of the next lot, as this lot becomes final, we would work out a way to get more of a buffer in this area between the parking, the business area parking, and our parking. One other comment about the shade trees, what we'll also need to do is get the light pole locations in. So that'll limit some spaces where we could put trees, but we would be finding ways to get some more shade and flower type trees around all the buildings. And just make it, to help scale the buildings down to the ground. As we come around the back of the site, we have a big area in here, which is currently paved. So what we would do in this area was basically keep any of the existing trees that are in islands right now, remove all the asphalt, and kind of create a meadow for this area. So something that would give color at different times of the year, but it would not need to be maintained. So because it's in that well zone, we don't want anybody in it. We come around the back of the site, we have the two bar type buildings. These would be a little bit different foundation plantings because we do have some of the mechanicals on the ground on those two buildings. We come around the back, we have a proposed dog area, a dog park, fenced in, mulch type surface, so that any of the residents could go out and run around and have dog time. I'm going to jump back to the courtyards of buildings 1 and 2. So we will have a central walkway that comes right between the two buildings, and then off each, or I should say on the inside of each building, we'll have separate courtyards for open lawn space for any type of activities. The one in building 1 will have a second fire pit, and it was asked last week, they would be a gas fire pit with automatic shutoffs and timers and things like that, so that they can't be left on. Building 2, we would have 2 more grill stations for the residents, and then again another bigger open lawn space to finish off the courtyards. A couple of other things that were discussed last week were getting a little bit more of a buffer planting along this side of the property. More shade type trees along the backs of the garage, so that we're breaking the back of the garage with some height. We could probably do some of that around the back of the mail building as well.
And part of that rationale from the design review board was you have the Bolton Manor property, and that they would be looking at just backs of garages and backs of buildings. So they thought maybe breaking that up a little bit with some trees would be decorative, but also give them some buffer.
Yep, and we would mix in shade, flowering, evergreen type trees as well. Probably more evergreen where we have some parking, so that we're not looking at cars. More shade type trees on the backs of garages to get the height to break up the top of the garage, plus any of the views possibly across to the bigger buildings.
So I have a question about all these trees. Have you given, I'm sure you have given consideration to the species in terms of maintenance and the speed at which they grow?
Yes, so you'll notice a lot of flowering trees around some of the bigger buildings. We went with those because the space that we have. We don't want to put big shade, don't want to put trees in that are going to be growing into the building. So we would pick, smaller type flowering type trees, maybe even columnar type trees that have more of an upright habit as opposed to a big broad type top. But yes, we would definitely, as we get into the, get away from the concepts and into the final planting type plans, we would have everything labeled. Every variety that we'd be using would be called out. It was mentioned last week too about native type plantings. What we typically do is try to stick with as many native plants as possible. There are certain areas where we have to use native plants, but for most part of the site, we try to mix in as many natives as possible, but we would never include any invasive type plantings anywhere on the site. So whether they're trees or shrubs or you know, if they're invasive, we wouldn't even be looking at varieties like that.
Good. Thank you.
Let's see, I think that's kind of the overall. And then I think I did hit on most of what was discussed last week. So if there are any other questions, I'd be happy to answer.
I just have a comment about the open field meadow space that you intend to create. I would just comment again, if, you know, when looking at what type of species you're going to put in that area, I think it would be ideal to make that native meadow. I mean, we have quite a bit of native meadow in Bolton, and a lot of bits and pieces of that are starting to get run down with development. So if we could bring that back to what we see natively in Bolton, that would be great.
Yeah, there is a conservation meadow type mix that works out, would be perfect for this spot.
Yep.
It has a variety of different types of seed in it. So some of the seed that's in there is to green it up quickly and stabilize the ground from washout or anything like that. But some of the other seed might take a year or two to kind of germinate. So it kind of changes throughout the year. You know, it changes throughout the year, but then it also changes from year to year as other species start to take over.
Okay.
Actually, I have a question for Valerie. Did we get any feedback from the design review board at this point?
Yes, we have. So the applicant was able to attend the meeting last Thursday. So I've summarized their comments in the memo, though, you know, we haven't had the opportunity for the design review board to review my summary. So there could be some things misstated, or I could have left some things out. So
pretty thorough.
I guess it's on its way at some point, but anyway, just thought I'd ask.
it is in the packets that I provided.
I must have missed it. Sorry about that.
Okay.
And the design review board did indicate that, you know, they were looking at these, this presentation fairly contemporaneous with what was presented. So they were, you know, also going to dive a little deeper into the plans that are included in the application set. But again, overall, on feedback in general for both the plantings, the landscaping, and the architectural design, the board spoke pretty favorable of. This was a great start to a project.
One question actually I do have about the landscaping at the entry of the project. So like what's coming right off of 117 on Main Street. Has there been any thought? It's hard for me to see, like I'm also partially blind to see that small little inset, but has there been any thought to the visibility coming out of that area? I know there's a couple large trees that are not super large, but largish trees there now. I know things are going to change because the leach is going to go there. But I'm just kind of interested to hear perspective on plantings in that area and making sure that there's a lot of visibility so people can see when they're trying to pull in or out of there.
Right. So we want to keep what's there if possible, but anything that we would add to it, you know, we work with that site triangle. So trees can be in triangles as long as the lower branches are a certain height so that you can see under them. But we'll, you know, as we get into it more, then, you know, we'll probably make adjustments to the sign or the location or the beds. If there's, you know, places we could add or enhance, then we would look at those areas as well. But yeah, we would try to keep it as safe or make it safer if possible. If there are some trees that have to come out when the fields get installed, then we'll look at how we could replace them.
Okay.
It looks like there isn't much lawn to be kept mowed. That's a good thing. Would any of these areas need to be mowed regularly?
I would guess there'd be some maintenance around the buildings, in the courtyards of the buildings. But I would think that anything around the perimeter would, we would probably want it to not get back to natural, but let those areas grow a little bit. Maybe they're mowed once or twice a year, as opposed to weekly around the manicured areas, I should say. But anything, in those well zones, we wouldn't be touching. So, maybe just maintenance to keep it under control every once in a while.
Anthony, just for, in case I missed it for protocol, did you identify yourself as resident and your address?
I'm sorry, this is Tony Jagodnik, East End Road. Okay. I said that earlier, I guess.
I may have missed it. I just wanted to be sure.
Yeah,
just,
sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I don't know if Joe, because Noah's still online. I know he probably had to drop by 7-ish if he had any questions. If not, and there are no other questions, and I think we can look forward to getting more of the feedback once the applicant has a chance to incorporate, and as the design review board recognize, I also do think this is a really good start. The buildings certainly were given thoughtfulness to look how they would sort of have the look and feel of the surrounding Bolton community. And so appreciate the work that's gone into it so far.
Thank you.
Val, do you have any other anything you want to add?
Not really. I don't feel inclined to detail the elements in the report that I provided, other than making sure that report of March 15th is part of the record for the public hearing. My understanding is that the applicant will be working through plan revisions and narrative responses to comments heard so far. So looking forward to that prior to a next public hearing.
I noticed that there was also a document from the community gardeners. There was a communication. It was dated today. I think it was authored by Lynn Dishler.
Yes.
So was that provided to the applicant? So that
no, I don't believe I have. I don't believe I have provided that to the applicant yet.
So just so we can at least be sure we cover it. One of the people who's I'm not sure what her role is with the community garden, maybe she's organizes that, but she had written a memo to Valerie on behalf of the board, to the board, but in some of the concerns what thoughts that she had about the area toward the community gardens was recognizing the issue with the zone 1 and the vehicle, can't pass over, but wanted to think about if the applicant look at maybe some vehicle access or parking for elderly or potentially residents that may have walking difficulties, so at least they can maybe get close to that area and then be able to get to the property a little easier. She had questions about how, with all the impervious surface, how that's going to be designed so that there's not runoff that flows toward the gardens and potentially flood them. She recognized the dog park and wanted to be sure there's a process for animal waste control so that, again, nothing as it leaches potentially or runs off into the gardens. So she had some good ideas or some good questions. She recognized that some things may be outside either the purview of the project or what the applicant could do, but she had some things that she'd like you to consider. At least, so I think it was well intended. So
Gerard, there was one other thing. They also mentioned like the delivery of like compost or loam or something they have done annually. And so in addition to the parking, there was like, they got deliveries there.
Yeah, okay. I may have missed that. I just was trying to summarize, but that's a good point. Yeah, so some things there, Jim, that maybe Valerie will be sure to get that to you. You can at least.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We certainly look forward to receiving that, and as always, we'll obviously review that in detail and respond accordingly and do what we can to accommodate.
Right. Right. So that's good. I just wanted to be sure we didn't let that drop. I saw it in some of the documentation that came through within the last day or so. So with that, I think we had a good presentations tonight. There's certainly a lot of work being done, as mentioned by you, Jim, in your outline when we started your talk. So I think what's appropriate is at least we work now to schedule the next hearing so that we can shoot to, bringing some of this new revisions back, some of the new documentation you had with maybe the peer reviews and things like that, so we can get that next round sort of behind us and keep the project moving. So I think we're probably looking at maybe the second week of April. We have a 40B hearing the first week of April with another applicant. So time-wise, does the second week of April work? You think you'd have materials back by then?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We've I know in terms of peer review responses, we're getting very close to being done already. And I won't speak for Market Square, but I think the plan revisions that were brought up as part of the DRB process are certainly within reason to be updated by that time. So it's a long way of answering your question, but yes.
Yeah. So Valerie, is that I think we had was April 6th the meeting we had with Mallard Lane. So I think because of some people's schedules, Tuesdays weren't working, but was the 13th? Is that a Wednesday?
I will not be available that night.
Right. What night are you available?
I could
during that week.
I could do the 12th or the 14th. I have preference for Thursday the 14th, but I can make either work.
You have a preference for the 14th?
Yeah.
Okay. How's that work for the board members? I can make the 14th.
I can live with that.
Okay.
Is there any chance that we could do Monday, the 11th? I don't know if that's, does that work for anybody? The 14th could actually work. I think Mondays are typically better for me, but I could make the 14th work.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I believe our council is not available on the 14th.
Okay.
I know there's a lot of competing interests here, so if
I'm the Tuesday problem, just for what it's worth. And
right, that's what I'm saying.
The Tuesday problem is I can't do 6. Right. If we did 6:30, I could probably make it, or 7, but 6 o'clock on Tuesday is too early.
It doesn't have to start at 6:30, but we've been doing that because it seems like during the COVID period, people have been home, or it worked, but as schedules change, right, we can always have a different time slot to start it. But so if does Tuesday work better for people, if it's like at 7? Does that work for you, Valerie, Tuesday?
Sure.
Would that work for Brian and Andy and Brad?
Tuesday works.
Okay.
Tuesday works for us, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So why don't we propose Tuesday, April 12th at 7 p.m.
That works for me.
Okay.
Before we continue, I have a couple of questions
Oh, sure, Andy, sure.
to the applicant. How many accessible housing units are there? Handicap accessible units?
Sure, thank you. I'm gonna defer to either Adam or Mike Tulipani, and I'm not sure if they have that handy. There's a calculation that goes into that, certainly. Do either of you have that information available?
I unfortunately don't have that number in front of me. But as Jim just mentioned, it's a statutory requirement as to how many units are accessible. And we will be going through those calculations to make sure we have the requisite number.
Okay, maybe we could follow up on it in the next meeting. I'd like to know the ratio of accessible units to total units, and also compare that to the ratio of accessible garage bays to total garage bays, and see if it's comparable. And I'd rather, for the garage bays, I'd rather err, if you can, on the side of having one extra, you know, in case there's a need for it. And also that might make that one building a little more symmetrical. If you put a handicap bay on each end, or I don't know.
Yeah.
It kind of stuck out to me architecturally. So I was thinking 2 would be great, but obviously if 2 is way too much, then there'd be no cause for that. So
Yeah,
I'd like to know the numbers at some point.
Yeah, good intentions, Andy.
If I may, we'll absolutely have those numbers for you for the next meeting. And certainly I wouldn't, I mean, if we have 1, then I can't imagine how 2 would be way too much. So we're happy to look at that.
Yeah. Thank you. Mm-hmm. So if no other questions, do we have a motion to continue to April 12th at 7 p.m.?
Move that we continue on April 12th at 7 p.m.
Thanks.
Second.
Okay. Want to roll call that,
And
Valerie?
yes, those in favor, Gerard Ahern,
Yes.
Andy Kishitz,
Yes.
Brad Reed,
Yes.
Brian Holmes,
Yes.
and Gabriella Mano.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for participating, and see you in April.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Good night.
Through March Madness.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Good night. So we just have some administration for the board. We Valerie put out 3 sets of minutes. I hope people had a chance to look at them. They look pretty thorough. I went through them. I didn't note any changes. So, but she has minutes for the February 1st, February 10th, and March 8th. So I'm going to bring those up, Valerie, in case people had a chance to read them.
Sure.
Thanks. We've got to give Valerie big kudos for getting all this documentation done. She's doing a lot of work for us, and it doesn't go unnoticed. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
They're thorough and they're just well done,
Yeah, I didn't notice anything. It's actually nice reading through some of that stuff because it makes me remember what we talked about.
Right. Yeah. And they're well documented. They're well done. So,
Yeah, it's helpful for me too.
mhm. Yeah. Well, and they're great for the record because we're gonna, as I say, we get toward looking at decision time and make sure we incorporate everything. We're gonna bounce some of the minutes back against the document, and no, we didn't have an oversight. just let Valerie know when she can flip through it a little bit if people are reading them or so I've already gone through them. So.
I always get confused by the voting numbers. Do we have 5 voting members on the issue itself, but then only 4 voting members for administrative purposes? Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. This set seems okay with me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, me as well.
Yep, that works for me.
Bring up the next set.
Mhm.
Flip a little bit. There you go. Mhm.
I still can't believe there's not enough traffic there for a light, but there is one at the center of town. It seems weird to me how that calculation is done.
I know. Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's also proximity between lights. That's what I had always thought as well.
Mhm.
So just because there's one
Right to the right.
right at 495, I think,
Mhm.
but he didn't mention that, so I don't know.
Yeah, maybe actually that I didn't think of that, but I thought that was weird.
It was interesting in your memo, Valerie, you mentioned that the police department had some comments about, they talked about maybe having some do not block type of signage or something, and they said some of that isn't enforceable, so, or something.
Yeah.
Interesting feedback, more current than what we had before.
Good to know for my own for my own purposes.
Yeah.
It's not enforceable. It's good.
Yeah. No, nothing's, yeah. I was still surprised, given it's a large project that, in the traffic peer review, I mean, it said, it doesn't meet the standard, but I don't get it on some of it, but.
I must have missed that. What was the response on the do not block?
The police said it's not enforceable. So they were like, you can put one, but like if people are stopped in a do not stop block, like there's nothing we can do about it.
So
them.
It's the penalty box, not the do not block driveway sign. The sign is preferred, but the striping on the road is not.
Right. Yeah, that's at the penalty box. Yeah.
Well, the one in front of the fire. Excuse me. The one in front of the fire department is pretty much ignored at rush hour anyway. There's a penalty box in front of the fire station now, and people just pile up there anyway. So.
Right. I say I don't even go down 117 anytime. I either go up to the Harvard Bloxboro exit, or I get off if the traffic at least moving up 495, and I go the back way down Sugar Road and around. I don't so that's why I can't believe it. It's going to be interesting.
The only thing I can think is, I mean, this was done during COVID, right? So, I mean, I know like some people were back to work, but like traffic patterns, in my opinion, are still not back to normal. So like in 5 years, this could be entirely different. I mean, I guess you could argue that all the time. You don't know what the traffic is necessarily going to be like in 5 years, but it's surprising.
Yeah, it's only gotten worse in the 20 years that I've been in town, and people have been here longer than I, so it's not going to get any better unless they have some type of overpass somewhere, or they get, as I said, they're going to look at a rotary down by the high school or something, but at some point, people just have to go other than 117.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see what kind of traffic impact the Paddock Estates has in Boxborough at rush hour. I don't know.
I know when I used to drive down to, I used to work in Boxborough, further down on the Acton Boxborough line, but I'd go down and past that. So in the mornings, people coming out to go toward 495, it seemed like it flowed pretty well because, and it was right on the access to 495. People trying to take a left to go toward, say Acton or in toward Concord that way, people wouldn't stop unless there was like someone stopping to go into the gas station coming off of 495, and it created a little pick. Cars could get out, but if there was a bus stop to to pick up kids at the end of the road, because there would be a lot of parents and a lot of people sometimes congregated there for the buses. Taking that left was just at a whim. Sometimes we just fly out thinking they have enough room and just go. So it wasn't great from when I used to just drive by it. But
yeah, that's what I would expect.
Mm-hmm. And I don't.
Are we good with these minutes?
Yep.
I think we should probably try to refrain from talking too much about the application outside of the public hearing.
Yeah.
Good with the minutes.
Yep.
Do we have to have a motion to approve each separate one?
No, you can do one to as written, as long as we don't have comments on them. But
okay,
we have one more set. I think is that the last set, Valerie?
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, these we were done with the last one, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so I would motion to approve the minutes
as written.
As written.
Perfect.
Second.
And those in favor, Gerard Ahern?
Yes.
Brian Holmes?
Yes.
Andy Kishitz?
Yes.
And Brad Reed?
Yes.
Perfect.
Thank you.
All right. And a motion to adjourn, and we're good. Done by 7:30. Good.
I will motion to adjourn.
Perfect.
Second.
Gerard Ahern?
Yes, thank you.
Brian Holmes?
Yes.
Andy Kishitz?
Yes.
And Brad Reed?
Yes.
Real quickly, so I missed yesterday, and it sounds like because of that I can't vote. I'm also not available on the 6th. Looks like that's when you guys scheduled the next meeting, which I'm not sure that matters anyways. If I'm not, I mean, I have no problem still being involved because I'm assuming I can still be involved and ask questions, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, but I can't. I'm not available at all that night, so I'm gonna miss another one anyways. So, but I guess it doesn't matter at this point, right?
Kind of move.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not used to that. So in previous towns I've worked in, they have not adopted the Mullen rule. So any absence would disqualify you. But I thought that Mullen would allow you multiples, but it apparently only allows one. So
okay, all right, that's a bummer. But again, I'll still be involved. I just can't make the 6th. So
okay. Appreciate your participation, however you can do it. So that's great.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for getting through March Madness. We had a lot of meetings this month already, and so take a break till April, I hope.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Val.
Sounds good. Thanks, everyone.